Ooh. Didn't realize the mic was already hot. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube. One of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going weekly games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. Back with another episode of Talking About Games. This is episode number 10. If you haven't been joining the show before or checked out the VOD, Talking About Games is a solo cast that I do focused on news stories in the gaming news cycle. But one of the things I try and do is kind of take those news stories and dive deep on them and provide some additional detail, looking at historical context, financial dynamics, technological impact, things of that nature, things that come out of my personal domain expertise from being a program manager, program director, portfolio manager, project program manager, and my experience in systems and software engineering. So without much further ado, let's get to it. A couple notes on housekeeping. Number one, since it is a solo cast, if you're not familiar, I will be taking breaks to drink coffee and stay up to speed. My apologies for getting things started a little late this morning. You can blame that on the Benadryl. Also, I have horrible allergies going on right now and have since the first time I mowed the grass this year. It is always the thing that happens. It will be like that until December, so I will probably blink more frequently than I would normally prefer to. I'm going to try and keep pushing through the show and not stopping to constantly wipe my eyes, but we may have to do what we have to do. So I am going to get a sip of coffee, and then we are going to get into our first news story, which is Horizon Call of the Mountain dev hit with more layoffs. We're going to talk about whether or not they're actually layoffs or not. And director departs, so give me just 1 second. Also going to, try and get through the show without spilling the coffee. So this news story over on GameSpot by George Yang. Also going to try and see the teleprompter through the haze of tears that are in my eyes. The developer of Horizon Call of the Mountain, Firesprite Studios, has laid off the game's director, Alex Barnes. It's unclear how many other developers, aside from him, were impacted by Firesprite's latest redundancies. Barnes announced his departure on Twitter yesterday, saying that he had been let go from Firesprite after nearly 7 years of working there. The people at and this is his quote, "The people at Firesprite and Guerrilla that pulled together to build Horizon Call of the Mountain were some of the most talented and dedicated developers I've had the pleasure to work with," he explained. "It has been the honor of a lifetime to have been a game director with a team like this." That is apparently not what I actually wanted to happen. Okay, so this follows a major layoff that has occurred within the last 90 days, done by Sony back in February of this year, where they laid off 900 employees or so. I want to caution readers of the mainstream gaming media's coverage of this topic and listeners and audience members of this show, because as far as I have seen and read, there's been no corroboration or verification that this is a studio layoff involving more than Barnes. Barnes announced that he had been let go on Twitter, as I mentioned, but as of the time that I was writing the script, there's been no verification that others have as well. Many sites have run this headline as being a layoff, and to date, it cannot be characterized as such, in my opinion. Regardless, Firesprite's next project, which may have been a Twisted Metal game, was also purportedly canceled. And that was the thing that we heard at the time of the layoffs in February. And obviously things at Sony, the gaming industry, and the wider tech industry level, things are not good given unplanned or post-pandemic deflation in sell-through. Firesprite is a British studio created in 2012 by former members of Studio Liverpool and acquired in 2021 by Sony Interactive Entertainment, or SIE. Like I said, I was going to try from stopping to wipe my eyes every few minutes, but they were just literally pouring down my face. The funny thing was, or is, and I don't mean ha-ha funny, but weird funny, is that at the time when they were purchased by SIE, I commented that, or asked the question rather, why would Firesprite agree to get back in bed with SIE again? And when I ask that question, you might say, why do you mean again? What do you mean again? Well, because as I mentioned, Firesprite was created by former members of Studio Liverpool. Studio Liverpool was a former SCE studio that was shuttered in 2012. And the popular belief is that it was due to sales of the Wipeout series plateauing and then declining with each iteration of the series. Studio Liverpool was a rebranding of its original name, Psygnosis, which was purchased by SCE in 1993. Psygnosis, Studio Liverpool, studios that had been known for being the developers of the Wipeout series, which had several iterations across multiple PlayStation consoles. Last, most notably, I think a launch title, or at least near launch title for the PlayStation 3, or maybe it was like one of the first big PlayStation Plus titles. And so while things are not definitive, history shows a through line of Psygnosis being bought by Sony, closed by Sony, and its spiritual successor going down the same path 9 years later. And at the time, it certainly appears to be careening towards those same results. So again, if we go back through the history, Psygnosis, bought by Sony in 1990, bought by SCE in 1993, did a number of Wipeout titles, shuttered by Sony in 2012. Some of those devs take off from Psygnosis Studio Liverpool, form Firesprite, and then 9 years later agree to be bought by Sony again. And then 3 years after being bought by Sony, have had a large number of their employee base laid off, their creative director laid off. Whether or not the studio is heading for closure, I'm not sure, but it's certainly not good times for that studio, and it seems to be a significant repetition of past history. If you'd like to read more about that history, I'd highly suggest an article by Eurogamer from 2015 titled Wipeout, the Rise and Fall of Sony Studio Liverpool, and I'll have that link for you in the show notes. I'm going to take a break here, grab some more coffee, and we'll move on to our second news story. Okay, seems like the eye-watering is calming down a little bit. Second news story, Star Wars Hunters gets June release date for Switch in new trailer. So I'll bring that news story up. This news story over on Game Informer, which I cannot even read on the teleprompter for all the ads. Star Wars Hunters gets June release date for Switch in new trailer. Zynga has released a new trailer for its upcoming competitive multiplayer game, Star Wars Hunters, revealing a June 4th release date alongside a new cinematic look at some of the characters. Star Wars Hunters will hit Switch and iOS and Android devices on that day, giving players the chance to compete with others in iconic locations like the forest moon of Endor, the icy planet of Hoth, and elsewhere while controlling hunters like J3DI, a droid who thinks he's a Jedi, Utumi, which is two Jawas stacked on top of each other in a trench coat, and more. So that should be pretty interesting. That space is going to be crowded in that time frame because we just got word that X Defiant is going live, I think on the 21st of May. So looking back at the trailers and the history around this title, this sounds to me like it's a hero shooter, a la Lawbreakers and Overwatch, as each character is supposed to have their own abilities. The game will feature multiple modes, including a basic one that is akin to Team Deathmatch, and one that sounds like a bit like Quidditch, where the teams are after an elusive droid instead of the Golden Snitch. The game releases globally on iOS, Android, and the Nintendo Switch, so it's going to be a concurrent, simultaneous launch across all 3 platforms. It is free to play, as you would expect, with it being a Zynga joint, and on Switch, it doesn't require Nintendo Switch Online. If you dig through the history of this game and you go back and look at the trailers and the news stories, what you're going to find is, in case you don't remember where you've seen it before, it was part of the February 2021 Nintendo Direct, where it had a 25-second reveal trailer. That trailer showed a Jedi or Sith, a Stormtrooper, a Bounty Hunter, and a Wookiee as suggested playable characters. The game was revealed at the time as having a 2021 release date. Here we are 3 years later. The game is supposedly set between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. The game was then shown later that same year at the September Apple event of 2021, the one where they revealed the iPhone 13 series. Gameplay is expected to be third person over the shoulder. At the time that it was shown at that second event, the game's release date had already been slipped to 2022. So shown at the Nintendo Direct earlier that year, and then, or actually the year before, and then, earlier that year, and then when you see it several months later, backing up a little bit, shown earlier that year with the 2021 release date, so it was shown and was supposed to be out later that same year, and then by the time you see it a few months later, that release date had already gone to 2022. No surprise, as these were the pandemic years, but funnily enough, the game was already taking sign-ups for early registration of player accounts, which would have led you to believe that it was nearly ready and prepped for some type of beta or for an approaching rollout. The segment that was shown as part of the segment that was shown at the time, the segment that was shown as part of the at the time iPad Mini segment to show off the power of that device, which by that time had not been refreshed in 2 years. So again, if you go back to September 2021, we had the iPad Mini 5th generation that had come out, I think in 2018, 2019, or 2019, had a long period of delay for refresh, kind of like we're seeing for the iPad, which is finally getting a new one here on the 7th of May. And so part of the stage presentation was about the power of the iPad Mini utilizing the A15 Bionic processor, I think the same one that the iPhone 13 was using, but that was underclocked in comparison to the chip that was running in the iPhone. And so it was part of that segment. So it should be pretty interesting. If you go back and look at the trailers, the premise is super interesting, but at the end of the day, what this is going to be is it's going to be a game that lends itself to mobile. I haven't found any indication of whether or not I would expect that it's going to have controller compatibility on mobile. Kind of in some ways, the trailers that I saw kind of looked like a level of fidelity of kind of like Fortnite on mobile. So maybe it will be that, but I'm not exactly certain. It looked at the time that even on the iPad presentation, the animations didn't look completely smooth. So we'll see how it does. Hopefully, if we're 3 years hence now, processors on mobile devices are significantly more powerful, and hopefully it will run fine on the Switch as well. So we're going to take another little break for some coffee, and we'll get rolling on our third news story, which is about Call of Duty making its return to the Xbox showcase stage. All right. Again, my apologies. Allergies are really horrible this morning. This next news story, Call of Duty makes its return to the Xbox Showcase stage. This story over on Polygon by Maddie Myers. Microsoft has announced the timing of the next Xbox Game Showcase to be live streamed on June 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Just like last year, the event will unfold on the Sunday of Summer Games Fest, which kicks off on June 7th, via live streams and in-person events in Los Angeles. Also similar to last year, Xbox's Showcase was followed by the Starfield Direct live stream. This year's showcase will be followed by a deep dive on an upcoming game, and according to the Verge's reporting, that's Call of Duty. So let's talk a little bit about what we know and kind of what is rumor and not necessarily officially announced. The popular theory is that this year's Call of Duty will be Black Ops Gulf War. Of course, when that rumor started, I've asked which one, that meaning whether the game occurs in the time of 1990 to 1991 and coincides with Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm, or whether this is a 2003 game based on Operation Iraqi Freedom. It's been a decade since Call of Duty was last on an Xbox stage at the major summer event. While continuing to be a powerhouse in the U.S., Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 was the #1 game in America last year in terms of revenue. It was outsold globally by Hogwarts Legacy. While I really enjoyed the Modern Warfare reboot of 2019, it was really 2020's Black Ops Cold War that cemented my return to the series, and I've onboarded to each successive Call of Duty title. We'll skip Call of Duty Vanguard and spend a lengthy amount of time in the ensuing seasons on multiplayer since I bought Call of Duty Vanguard too. I just didn't particularly enjoy it, and I did not stick with the multiplayer for more than a hot second. While the digital fire of the game and what appears to be a poor redaction job by the same legal intern that leaked Xbox proprietary information in court uploads twice last year is the main reason for the primary belief that the follow-on to the showcase will be CoD, as well as an article saying it will be by The Verge's Tom Warren. I've also heard influencer and podcaster Paris Lilly on an episode of this week's Kind of Funny Games Daily speculate, what if this is play action? These are my words. And the direct will really cover something else. So Paris's thought was, what if, the badly redacted stuff and the Activision logo on the digital flyer were deliberately put there, kind of a la Apple has done in sometimes some of its previous events, under Steve Jobs, maybe sometimes misleading people in a deliberate fashion. And then what if the intention is for it to cover something else? In this week's Kind of Funny Games Daily final Xcast episode, there were speculations, I think, by, not speculations, but hopes, mentioned by Alana Pierce, that, she was hoping it would be Fable. There were thoughts about whether or not, maybe it starts with Call of Duty, but then it goes into some other game near the tail end of the presentation. I'm not sure. We all love, to have thoughts about, exciting thoughts about what some of these things might really be. But we'll just have to see. Needless to say, it is something that gets the Xbox fan base excited, regardless of what it actually is. Sorry. The Starfield Direct after last year's showcase, as well as ensuing coverage in the lead up to its Labor Day weekend launch, was definitely part of the formula that led to Starfield charting NPD for more than once after launch, and maintaining high concurrent player numbers for the first few months as well. Some speculated that this is a do or die showcase for Xbox, and I don't necessarily think that it is. Xbox is in third place by console install base among the two other platform holders. Depending on what chart you look at and when, they are theoretically third in revenue, with Sony in first and Tencent in second, followed by Nintendo, NetEase, EA, possibly Epic Games, although Epic is not a publicly traded company, so I don't really technically count the popular revenue estimation as valid. That 5.8 billion figure that I've seen on some charts for Epic Games revenue is supposedly what they made on Fortnite alone 3 years ago. So the top 10, as I see it, are really likely rounded out by Take-Two, MiHoYo, which is the studio/publisher that does Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail, Embracer, Roblox, and Square Enix. Point being, their place in the landscape of the gaming, Xbox's place in the landscape of the gaming industry is pretty clear. Not so great hardware sell-through, okay gaming revenue and services revenue, meaning Game Pass, and industry-leading B2B revenue in terms of what they sell to other developers and publishers in tools, infrastructure, licensing, their Azure development environment, and support services that it provides to other developers out of its gaming division. I don't really think that anyone should be setting higher expectations for Xbox than what it has delivered in the first 4 years of this generation. And what can be definitively said of that track record of performance is that the on-stage presence and trailer content of the showcases has been fine, in my opinion, fine to good. But the actual deliveries following those promises have not resonated with the market in overwhelming fashion. As seen by console sales numbers and, opinions of games on Steam from the user community, etc. I expect surprise commitments for Clockwork Evolution and South of Midnight to be arriving sooner than anticipated, and are having more to show in terms of gameplay at this year's showcase. So again, those two games, Clockwork Evolution, which is the Bioshock-looking game, and South of Midnight, which is the game that is centered around a character that has some magical skill set and notionally around kind of voodoo or religious practices, kind of in the mid-southeastern United States, along the Gulf of Mexico. Those two games I expect are going to show up maybe this year, maybe early 2025. And I expect to hear something about that, like, to be released within a year, or something to that effect. And if we don't get actual dates, I expect that we'll see hopefully significant gameplay, particularly for South of Midnight, where we really didn't see anything but kind of an introduction story trailer last year. Overall, expectations for both stage content and endgame follow-through should not be any higher than what we've seen to date. And anything exceeding that is upside. Sorry, I took Benadryl before I went to sleep last night to try and get these allergies down. Then only slept like about 4 hours, so I got a bit of a tongue twister going on this morning. So one of my points is that kind of me personally, I'm looking at what Xbox has done this generation, and I'm not expecting. I mean, we're definitely at the midway point. I personally am thinking of this generation as being 7 years, just like it has historically been before. I don't really expect it to go on for 8 years, because AMD and Nvidia, the march of technology, Intel, the march of technology goes on. Those companies aren't pumping the brakes on putting out GPUs or moving the GPU technology, particularly while the race for AI is going on. There is no time for them to slow down. And I think, everybody's gonna, despite the pandemic and low sales numbers for some consoles due to supply constraints, I don't think that that's going to give them a reason to pause. And in particular, since both corporations revealed that they've got a little inside baseball on what each other's planning on doing, I have speculated that I expect one of them to go early. And so, even if one goes in 2028, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Xbox tries to pull another Xbox 360 and get their console on the street a year ahead of the PlayStation, particularly given that there are notions that maybe that console is going to be something significantly different in terms of addressable market that it's trying to hit, or the type of consumer that it's going after, than previous iterations of their console. And another reason why I think, again, don't expect expectations higher than what, has been delivered to this point is one of the popular notions, philosophies in software engineering, and something that's kind of deeply embedded and woven into the way I think about the world, is you never estimate or project that a team is going to perform any better than what they did the last time. You don't necessarily take a look at what they did last time and then predict that they're going to achieve a higher velocity in coding the next software project. Maybe you do, I mean, you play with those numbers a little bit. You look at learning curve. You look at maybe some additional tool that came in. Like you obviously wrap into that calculation the notion of code reuse. So there are some accelerants, but you don't make like wildly greater extrapolations of what you expect that team, or how you expect that team to perform, much better than what they did last time. You expect them to do the same thing that they did, because that's the only thing that and you hope that they're able to improve and that they do better, and then that will be upside. So my point is I'm just not given to the nature of thinking about a team or a company. Granted, these aren't necessarily software companies, software development teams in all cases, but that's the way I think about the world, doing any better. So I'm gonna got a couple people in chat. Sorry, teleprompter's wildly different from where my health and monitoring setup is here, so I'll try and get a look at it. Yeah, and I just I just can't see with my eyes watering, so I'm gonna try and pop the chat out. Let's see if I can zoom in on it a little. I can, but now it won't scroll. It's driving me nuts. Priscilla is in the chat. Thanks a lot for swinging through. Priscilla says, I'm just now recovering from being sick and allergy, so I understand that annoyance. Yay, I made it. Good morning. I don't know why the chat won't scroll while I'm zoomed in. It's driving me nuts. Otacon Ocelot says, what's good, Logic? Good morning. And says, hey to Priscilla. So thanks so much, guys, for coming through. I appreciate you. I don't expect a lot of people to show up to these sessions live. Most of the viewers check things out in the VOD, but I do appreciate you guys rolling through. So let's go back to this article. In May of last year, I spoke to a set of calculations I ran in 2022, which I no longer have after deleting my old Twitter account out of frustration with the gaming community, and eventually return to Twitter. But my calculations showed the production pipeline for Xbox would not return to green until 2025. So I had looked at where each development team had been acquired, that of the new ones that had been onboarded, where their last releases were. For the teams that hadn't, put games out, I did a calculation based around how long I thought it would take them to flush their production pipeline of any releases that they were currently in work on, retool, reorient, any type of reset that needed to be done, staffing back up, etc. And what I came down on was them really kind of hitting all cylinders, and what the corporate strategy that Xbox had talked about, hitting all cylinders, was not until 2025. Now, those calculations were oriented around the initial strategic notion that Xbox's desire was to get to 4 releases per year, 1 per quarter, of AAA content, so big games. They came back and re-ratcheted that last year in the round of interviews that they did at Summer Games Fest post their showcase. And Matt Booty has since at that time re-ratcheted that to just 4 releases, not necessarily AAA or big games or known IP. And at the time, he talked about things like Towerborn counting as one of those. He kind of mentioned in a stream of consciousness after that, if he was looking at last year, he would also count Redfall as one of those. Neither of those games really hit my particular stride of what I want from their portfolio in terms of those 4 releases, but it is what it is. Earlier this year at the business update in February, I think it was, Booty mentioned that Xbox should be getting 10 games this year from its first-party studios. So I'm waiting to kind of see what comes out of the showcase and the articulation of exactly what those games are. I've made various lists of what those games could include. I had someone who disagreed with me on the Basement Radio Arcade podcast also provide a list. I re-ratcheted their list. Things like DLC, expansions, expandables, those are things that I expect to see. I expect to see, obviously, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 come out of their showcase, an updated package and rollout of new content for Elder Scrolls Online. We're, obviously probably getting Shattered Galaxies or whatever for Starfield. I expect those things to be shown on the showcase. I don't count those as new releases. So we'll see what's coming out of the 10 games this year. And when I talk about what those calculations were wrapped around, they also targeted redundancy. Now, I made these calculations and I put the tweet out referring back to those calculations in May of 2023. So this was both before their showcase, but also before the emails that we saw out of the second court upload and leak. And Phil and Spencer mentioned in there, and he's mentioned at the time since, but particularly in that email thread, if you go and dig through it, he mentioned the exact thing that I had articulated before, which is that to get to 4 releases a year, you really need to have 5 or 6 releases in the barrel, because you expect that one of those teams is going to miss, and so you have to build redundancy. The Microsoft Development Studio portfolio targets that and should sufficiently be able to cover that. It should have been able to do so with 23 studios. It should certainly be able to do it with 33 or 32. I can't remember what the count is now that I would have to take away Toys for Bob. But at any rate, I had expected it to hit 2025. My calculations actually said 2024, but I also heaped in there a chunk of my own skepticism into the likelihood of that and pushed it out to 2025. At any rate, folks, it seems like we are on track for my calculations. Nobody should be running around waving a victory flag until we see the cadence hit that mark. And I said it wouldn't be until next year. And that was before we saw how Starfield and Forza turned out. And when I talk about Starfield and Forza, I talk about how the fan base really likes those games. I probably like Forza more than I thought I would, or more than my initial impressions took. But Starfield and Forza, Starfield in particular, was met with with its own detractors amongst the the critics crowd. But most importantly, again, I look back at kind of how the Steam community regards those games, and the Steam community doesn't regard either of those games particularly highly, at least the last time I checked. Starfield, for its most recent, may be up to mixed now, but both of them, throughout their current life cycle, have had mostly negative regard on Steam overall, and in recent reviews. Again, Starfield may have improved. I didn't check back and look at it last night. So until then, keep tempered expectations, in my opinion. Enjoy what you have and what you get, and as we tell the kids, and don't throw a fit. So I'm going to take another little spot of coffee, and then we'll get on to the last story here. We talk about productivity and velocity, and this is one of the things that kills mine is during this time of the year, or really throughout the remainder of the year, sometimes it gets so bad that like I literally can't work and keep typing for more than 5 or 10 minutes at a time before I have to stop and wipe my eyes. So this last news story, Sins of a Solar Empire, will release on Steam this summer. So this news story over on Rock Paper Shotgun by Edwin Evans. Sorry, I'm zoomed in way too far there. 4X meets real-time strategy game Sins of a Solar Empire 2 will finally launch on Steam this summer. Stardock and Ironclad Games have announced a couple of years after going into technical early access on the Epic Game Store. I love the first Sins, and so did Kieran Gillen. RPS in peace. I don't believe that person is deceased. I think that is just a former writer who worked at Rock Paper Shotgun. Also, not the comic book creator, Kieran Gillen, who is popular for Young Avengers and several other comic books. Whose 16-year-old review dwells appreciatively on the spectacle of cruisers and frigates bouncing to hyperspace on the very edge of the solar system. We don't seem to have written about the second one. Time to change that. I guess here's the Steam release announced trailer. So the original title, the OG title, enjoys a very positive review score from the Steam community, 97% for recent reviews and 93% all time after debuting in 2012. I have the original Sins of the Solar Empire. I've only scratched the surface on it, but it's a great get for 2024 when we're already getting Homeworld 3 this month, in fact, next week on the 13th. Sins of the Solar Empire 2 is expected in Q3 of 2024. So looking forward to that one. Should be I would expect it to be yet another good game. Sorry, I'm going to see if I can bring up this other news story. I wasn't particularly planning on getting into this, but I think, yeah, we've got some additional time this morning. It looks like that worked. Okay, so this is an older news story, but I've been doing a ton of research for this. So I do want to go back to the news story and cover it. And like I said, I'm going to take another quick break and we'll get to it. Okay, so this last kind of research topic news story, and I'll tell you about the detail I've been trying to dig into here after we go through the intro. Ubisoft Forward is the next summer gaming event to mark on your calendar. Live from LA on the 10th of June. This story over on Push Square by Liam Croft. Ubisoft is the latest company is the latest company to reveal its not E3 live stream, which is another term that I also use, not E3 or faux E3 live stream for the upcoming summer months, with its live and in-person event set to take place on the 10th of June 2024. It is 3 days after Summer Game Fest, streams live from the YouTube Theater, fronted by Jeff Keighley. Ubisoft teases it'll have updates and upcoming releases to the show. Now, since then, we have gotten an additional trailer giving us some additional detail on Star Wars Outlaws as well. So, one of the things I've been trying to do is, and the reason it's been so long since I've been back for talking about games, is because I tried to get this done to incorporate into a show, and it just became really unwieldy and impossible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this a little kind of by bits and pieces in future editions of talking about games, which I am hoping to do more regularly. We'll talk about that here at the end. But I'm probably going to break up this segment into several segments on the tail end of talking about games. And so what I've been trying to do is so Ubisoft, in my opinion, had the best show from last year, at least the show that appealed to me mostly. Lots of gamers talk about how they don't like to hear from developers, but that is actually the thing that I want the most out of E3, Summer Game Fest, faux E3, not E3, is I don't like the trailer palooza that has been a PlayStation shtick for the number of years. I personally have never really understood the feeling that in a lot of past E3s, the takeaway, the walkaway has been that, PlayStation won E3 when they've come up and they've just shown trailer palooza. And that's great. There's always the banter about, well, how does this get us great games? And all I care about is great games. And that's great. I'm talking about what I prefer. Again, having a background in software and systems engineering, what I prefer and what I want to hear from is I want to hear from the developers, the creative leads, somebody who's actually working on the project. Here's one of the problems that I've cited with the showcases of 2023. So many of those, and I mean from Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox, whether they did it as part of Summer Game Fest or in the walk-up to Summer Game Fest, so many of the games that were shown, we had no idea what those games were. You had to go off and Google and go to Xbox Wire or the PlayStation blog or IGN to find out the additional details about the game. They would come up and show. I had no idea what South of Midnight was about. There was a very long write-up on Xbox Wire afterwards, and that's what I had to go read to actually go figure out what that game is. And when I say we don't know what that game is, I mean you don't know whether it's a third-person shooter, a first-person shooter, an action-adventure game, an action RPG, right? It's just you just get a trailer and a little snippet, and I'm like, that's not what I want. And I get and I understand that there, if you show, 15 games during your showcase, I get and understand that 3 to 5 of them or whatever are going to be that, or just they won't have been baking in the oven for long enough for you to tell the viewers any more than that. But what I really loved was the Ubisoft showcase, where for each of their games they brought a principal lead or the creative director out on stage, while like a soft trailer played in the background. And what I mean by that is just like a cinematic trailer or something that didn't really give you a lot of detail, played in the background. They gave you an intro to the game, but then they talked you through what the game is, what types of things you'll be able to do. And then they got into a longer detailed gameplay trailer. So each presentation, except for some of the small ones, was like about 10 minutes a piece or thereabouts. And it was really meaty content. To me, it was actually significant and much better at conveying to the gamer and the consumer and the user what they were going to be getting into. Hey, Warawana is also in the chat. Man, I appreciate you guys. I know you guys are a lot of my regulars and people who are familiar with me speaking on podcasts, but it means a lot to me that you guys showed up this morning. And so what I did when I heard this announcement is I went back and I looked at everything that Ubisoft announced last year. And then I said, let me make a list of the things that I think kind of typify, company performance out of your showcase. And I looked at, did the game that they announced actually deliver? What we know of the sales that it achieved, what it got for critical review in terms of its Metascore, and anything else that was pertinent about the release. So let's get started here. So everything shown at Ubisoft Forward 2023, there were 12 games shown, plus they provided an update to their subscription service. The first thing that they showed was, let me check the time again. And so I don't know how many of these we're going to go through, probably maybe 2. Sorry, 2 or 3. Warwana mentions, all good, man. Appreciate it. And Priscilla says, oh, hello, Otacon. Sorry. The print small on the laptop. I don't usually use a laptop for health and monitoring, but like an idiot, I set up for this session over here at the station that I actually have set up to record live or Let's Plays. And when I record Let's Plays, I don't have a health and monitoring setup, which is a PC or a Chromebox hooked to a larger monitor where I can actually see the live stream. So I had to quickly ratchet in place my blogging laptop. And like I said, with the allergy tears streaming from my eyes, I just can't see it that well. So Priscilla mentions a great way to finish up my night shift and start my weekend. So thanks. And then I treat to listen to the gaming news. Thanks so much, Priscilla. I appreciate you. So let's go back to the rundown. So the first game that they showed was Just Dance 2024 edition. Sorry, but it was part of their content. I got to cover it. That game actually released on October 24th, 2023, so on time in accordance with the release date of the showcase. It achieved a Metascore of 68 on PlayStation 5, 72 on Nintendo Switch, and is on the Series X and S, although it has no Metascore at this point. So if you're unfamiliar with Ubisoft's past history, one of their largest selling games is the Just Dance series. Back in the Nintendo Wii era, it was one of the highest selling games because it turns out that game and Nintendo Wii. So lots of Nintendo Wiis actually went to retirement homes, to senior communities, and became like a community device for people to use. And one of the most popular things on it to be used in those retirement communities and senior homes was Just Dance. So there you go. It is a very important title to their overall P&L portfolio and their AOP for each year. So, it does what they need to do. We'll talk a little bit now about a game that I played. So Brap is on board. Says, good morning, Brap. Good to see you. Okay, Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora was another game that they covered in their showcase last year. That game released on December 7th, 2023. So again, on time based on the showcase. Now, when I say on time based on the showcase, I'm not going back necessarily to whether or not the game was announced to come out sooner and then got delayed. In some of those, I do get into that, but by and large, I talk about, what they said they were going to do at the showcase versus what they actually did. So that game released on December 7th of 2023. Brad, you were asking on Twitter earlier this week, what do people do for allergies? And here we are. So that game achieved Metascores of 72 on PC, 72 on PS5, 75 on Series X and S, Xbox Series X and S. And it got a, I don't know what that is because I wrote these notes so long ago. I said 4.5 on EGS. So I think that's a reference maybe to a site or so. Yeah, I think that's a reference to an Xbox score. So on Metacritic, I'm sorry. It has a 4.5 review score on the Epic Game Store. Sorry. Like I mentioned, I started pulling this part of the show together weeks ago, and I was trying to get it ready for a standalone talking about games. I was not able to achieve that. There's so much information and data I had to crawl through here. As a result, some of these earlier games, I made the notes weeks ago and literally may not remember what I wrote if I made it like a note or shorthand. So yeah, 4.5 on Epic Game Store. And my voice is also cracking because I took Benadryl and drained a lot of fluid last night, but unfortunately didn't do anything to dry my eyes out. So Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora was a game by Massive Entertainment utilizing the Snowdrop engine, first announced in March of 2021. It was originally, I think it was March 2021. I may have a typo there because I have 201. I suspect I missed the second two, but hopefully that's not 2018 or 19. I think it was 2021. It was originally planned to come out between April 22nd. It was originally planned to come out in April of 2022. In March of, geez Louise, man. I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry, bear with me. So it was originally planned to come out between April of 22 and March of 23. And what I mean by that is when Ubisoft announced the target. So a lot of Ubisoft targets come out of their earnings calls and they will say, this game is expected in the back half of fiscal year whatever, or in fiscal year whatever. and based on that, I have these bracketed ranges based on what the fiscal year wrap is for Ubisoft, which I think runs from April of one year to March of the next year, and that's why I say April 2022, March 2023. In June of 2022, it was delayed into the next fiscal year, so then it had a target date of April 2023 through March of 2024. Resulted sales for that game, as far as we know. UK sales charts for the week ending December 9th. When it came out, it was number 5, and then it was number 12 the following week. Supposedly, the game has onboarded 2 million players and earned $133 million in revenue. In comparison, this is compared to Massive's last 2 AAA games, The Division of 2016 and The Division 2 in 2019, which did numbers of $330 million and $264 million, roughly in their initial launch weeks. So achieving about a half and a third of what their previous AAA title debuts involved. I don't think anyone expected or should have expected Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora to do the same numbers as the Division or the Division 2. Those numbers are uncorroborated. I'm pretty sure those numbers I found from looking back. Usually when I say uncorroborated, that means I saw some numbers on Insider Gaming. That's a reach that I only make when I can't find real numbers, and I tend not to ever use NeoGAF or Reset Era numbers. And Assassin's Creed Mirage is performance currently stands at 5 million players, estimated at $250 million in revenue. Assassin's Creed Mirage, obviously not a game from Massive, but another Ubisoft portfolio game. It was supposed to come out with The Way of the Water in December of 2022, so it was delayed a year from that release window. But overall, my summary point of that game and it showing at the showcase kind of landed where you would probably expect it to land in terms of Metascore. Pretty good, solid game. Not great or something that necessarily gets it. I think it has been nominated for a couple things. Maybe not in but across the 5 award shows. Which I don't think I can recite right now, but DICE, GDC Choice, BAFTA, the TGAs, and Golden Joystick. So actually, I can recite them. It did get nominated for a number of awards, so it had pretty decent critical acclaim, and was noted as I don't necessarily say a standout title, but one that was noticed by the critical media. So overall, I didn't think too bad of a performance for a game that they announced at the showcase. And I think I'll go over one more. Okay, so sorry in the chat. Lord Metroid is here. What's up, everyone? Good morning. Warwana, all numbers are real if you believe them enough. Yeah, very true, Warwana. I tend to, I'll talk about belief systems here at the end. So the last one I'll go over is Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. This was another game released shown at their showcase. And again, the whole point of this was for me to go back and revisit everything that Ubisoft announced in last year's showcase, and then compare it to what the actual outcome and performance of those games were. That game released in on January 18th of 2024. Has meta scores of 87 on Xbox Series, 86 on PS5, and 84 on PC, and 88 on Nintendo Switch. It has a 4.8 on the Epic Game Store. And if you're not familiar with the Epic Game Store review system, I don't necessarily consider it a rubric or a yardstick, but it is a decent corroborative point. The way Epic does things is they randomly select a sample of people who have actually purchased the game. So the reason why I give it some credence is because, again, it targets people who actually bought the game, just like Steam does, where Steam, that's a requirement. Like, you can't review a game unless you've actually bought it. Can't submit a review. And so they do a random sampling of people who bought the game, and then they have them submit review scores, and so that's that number. So it's not from everyone who bought it, so it doesn't have the same veracity as a Steam community review, in my opinion. I'm not saying that everyone on Steam who buys a game, I rarely submit review scores, but I feel like the Steam community review score is a little more reflective of a larger population sample than what EGS does. But EGS, I think, kind of does its best. Epic Game Store does its best to kind of normalize what the expected outcome of the scores are by doing the randomized sampling. Uh, let's see. This is me still trying to focus on the laptop without having to lean down. Lost Metroid mentions that Prince of Persia is a great game. War says, I don't like the EGS review system. Only asking people who play longer sessions. But mentions nothing is perfect. So I guess War is saying within the EGS system, and that's great for pointing that out. It's not something I'm aware of, but I guess maybe there's a minimum threshold of playtime that they use to determine who that sampling is. And yeah, I agree. I mean, what that means is, while that gives you some additional, veracity in terms of people who spend enough time with the game and getting their opinion, but what it eliminates is people who maybe didn't spend a lot of time with the game because they didn't like it, and then they didn't stick with it. And, what we talk about on the Enough to Keep Going show as a falling off of a game. So Prince of Persia Lost Red. So those are its Metaswords. Sales, as far as we know, as far as we believe, again, these are uncorroborated, 300,000... Yeah, about 300,000 in sales for about $15 million, uncorroborated as of the end of January 2024. I think those numbers came from Inside Gaming. Again, I'm reading notes that I took like probably going on a month ago now. So I think what I wrote was about 300,000 in sales for 15 million. Let me just check that. Let me ask my buddy over here. Computer, what is 300,000 times 50?
300,000 times 50 is 15 million.
Okay, well, there you go. So Ubisoft Montpellier. The game is by Ubisoft Montpellier. Montpellier.
Yes,
my French.
Ubisoft.
Okay, my AI was trying to be a guest on the show. You were not invited. Ubisoft Montpellier, built on the Unity engine, and it was a cross-gen title, also released for PS4 and Xbox One. The Ubisoft Forward 2023 announcement was the first time the game had received official PR treatment. So we kind of knew that this game was baking, but it hadn't, as far as I remember and was able to go back and look, it hadn't been seen on stage or really had a lot of any official content shown about it. I think the most we'd gotten on it was a press release where we were notified that is what Massive Entertainment was working on. All right, Warner, I appreciate your I love your long entries, but you're hitting me with a long one here this morning at my worst of times. When the info first came up for me on EGS, it said something about people doing a longer session because it made me think people who didn't like it would quit the game, so it will likely skew positive, in my opinion. Yeah, I agree. You're definitely eliminating that out of the feedback loop. So I think that's going to do it for me today. I've got a lot more to cover in the Ubisoft showcase and performance of the resultant output, but I'm going to cover those in future episodes of Talking About Games. So talking about games and trying to be more consistent, I think I have the formulation and framework for the show to go ahead and do it like as a regular thing. So my plan and intention right now is I'm going to try and do it probably every 4 days. And some days I just won't be able to because of something going on with work or something else. But basically my plan cadence right now is I'm going to do a show and then I'm going to take 3 days. And that's because it takes me basically a full night to pull a script together, which means that'll be a night that I won't be gaming. And then I'll have clobber with other podcasts that I'm on. So my plan right now is to do a show, take 3 days. On the third day, the evening of the third day, pull together the script for the next show and do the show the following day, which gets us to, an every 4 day battle rhythm. So we'll see if I'm able to stick with that. So as of right now, the next planned Talking About Games is next Tuesday morning, which I think is the 7th of May. And I do plan on that being a morning show. So it'll probably be Pure Bouts roughly the same time. For people who are new to the show, and I'll just reiterate for the people who are familiar with it, again, the reason why I present a lot of this data and a lot of the historical context and a lot of the numbers, it isn't because I insist upon you believing me. I really hope, my hope would be no one listens to this show and listens to me either here or on Basement Radio Arcade podcast, or on Enough to Keep Going, and walks away. I think a lot of you guys who are in the chat are regulars and have heard me for a long time. You hear me constantly say I have zero regard for people who come into a podcast chat and mention a talking point, and their validation of that talking point is some personality said that. Like, the things I've done in life, the people I've been yelled at, I don't care, right? If some internet personality asserts something, that is not a validation. That is not a rubber stamp. That doesn't pass muster with me, and it does not pass a smell test if what you're telling me doesn't correlate with math, quantitative data, tangible evidence, anything of that nature. Please don't come at me with an argument about so and so said that, because I don't care. I don't give any deference to any of these people. None of them have done anything significant or great, in my opinion, that renders unto them the right to be believed in a room. One of the things I constantly talk about in mentoring engineers is one of the fallacies, in my opinion, in life and in professionalism is, and I try and catch the engineers young. When we're young as engineers, we sometimes come away with this belief that senior engineers, senior developers could just walk into a room and assert something. And I would contend no. I have a greater expectation and a higher bar for senior engineers and senior developers to be able to walk the dog and articulate step by step why they're saying that they believe something or why they are cautioning us not to do a thing. I don't expect them to just walk into a room, wave their hand, and then expect to be believed with no explanation, articulation, or any foundational, truth or explanation underneath what they're asserting. And so just by being an influencer and having a large number of followers, that means nothing to me. So by the same token, what I don't want is, I don't want somebody to listen to this show. And I get a lot of compliments and I definitely appreciate them. People talk about, me being hyper specific, very detailed, providing references, etc. But I really don't want anybody to ever hear me on any podcast and go to another podcast and say, Game Logic said umpty scrunch, right? Based on why, right? That's not the point. The point of the information that I put out is I really encourage people to do something similar to what I do, which is take that one piece of information, go bounce it off 2 or 3 other sources at minimum, and then use your own domain expertise and your own experiences to then arrive at your own conclusion. I don't want you to believe what I say. I want you to take what I say, bounce it against 2 or 3 other second and third opinions, and then arrive at your own conclusion. And notice that I said, and this is where I'm talking about belief systems, notice that I said based on your domain expertise and your experiences. That means not based on your belief system and the way you want things to turn out, right? Thereby taking what you've heard and skewing it in a direction to mean what you want it to mean, to achieve whatever you want for your preferred platform or the company you cheerlead for or whatever that may be. Heck, and I'm sorry, like I said, my eyes are watering now, so it's hard for me to see. It says, "What's up, good people?" Brad says, "I spoke to a class about exclusives being bad, and they all applauded." Warawana says, "This is why I enjoy your content. You're logical, honest, and search for facts." And I think I don't know what the muscle emoji means. I'm sorry, but it says I mean. So I think Hair Heck means that he agrees, and I apologize. Like I said, Henry Heck. Sorry, like I said, my eyes are watering from allergies. It's really hard for me to see this morning. So my point is again, I hope that what I put out is something useful. What I've always contended since I started doing this, 22 years or so ago, was if something I say gets to one person and that provides them an additional perspective, or an additional bit of information for them to go and bounce off their own personal research, then I'll have achieved my goal. My goal isn't to be, I think you guys may have seen someone on Twitter, I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, asked, why don't I have more followers? And I responded, I said, because I don't do the things that theoretically you have to do or that people do to gain more followers, because that's not really my objective. The number of followers I get, number of listeners I get will be whatever it is. What I want is, my goal is to put out information that is usable for people, not usable for weaponization in the console war, but useful in terms of you learning something or hearing something that you haven't heard, or really just hearing something that causes you to think. Tip your head to the side and kind of say, oh, wow, I hadn't considered it from that perspective, or I hadn't thought about that, or I didn't know that. So I hope all of that is useful. Lord Metroid says, I use loratadine for allergies. Give them a shot. Yeah, I'm definitely going to blast these allergies with whatever I can find. Brap says, I'll often take things we have discussed and research those things so that I learn and have a better understanding. Yeah, so I appreciate you, Brap. Sorry, my voice is cracking from the Benadryl because his throat got dried out. So thanks a lot, everybody who swung by this morning. Definitely did not expect the turnout. So I appreciate you. For anybody who happened to come through the live stream, as I mentioned, I appreciate you. For anybody who happens to watch the video on demand, the archive version of this episode of Talking About Games on the Rounding Off Infinity gaming channel on YouTube, please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can just receive a notification whenever I post new content. Again, next episode that I'm planning will be Tuesday morning, the 7th of May. And Priscilla says, thanks for the information as always. Thank you, Priscilla. So until next time, take care of yourself, stay safe out there, play the games that you like, come here to talk to me about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going weekly games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, and also a co-host on the Basement Radio Arcade podcast. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for me. I'm out of here.
Appreciate your sound. 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 Appreciate your sound, need a renovation.